Right. Thank you very much. Now, Billa, there is Cameroon's educational system is pegged on a particular formula. It's called competence-based approach. Right from primary school, they are being told to, there is a formula for competence-based approach. That is, they identify that which you're competent with and they train you all along, which seems, in text, it seems to be good. But why is that not reflective with our students? Why is it that everyone seems just to grapple, just as Reverend has said here, just grapple the knowledge the way it is being taught and replicate it, and then it ends there? And when you come out of school, you barely can even reproduce anything that you learned in the classroom. Should we blame the students for not picking what they are being taught so well, or should we blame the teachers for not making the lessons so realistic? Because these too much theories and concepts that are being taught in school make it a bit difficult. Sometimes you talk about fishing in Norway, in Cameroon, where we have fishermen, fisher pots here, we don't have those things here. Map reading, they're talking about map reading in Sierra Leone, in places not very familiar with us. Should we say the tailoring of our system makes it so problematic for students not to be productive?
Thank you. I think the idea of competence-based approach, as you have said, is, in theory, when you look at it from the theoretical perspective, you say, oh, but this is a good theoretical framework for our education. But what practical implication is it having? When we look at, for example, if we are talking about each teacher looking at the competencies of the learners, first and foremost, there has to be that number that can permit the teacher, first of all, to be able to identify those competencies. But when you look at our classrooms, you see the population that is way beyond control for a teacher. So it becomes very difficult for the teacher to, first of all, even know the students, talk less of knowing their skills, their individual strengths, and their weaknesses. Because in education, if those weaknesses are not identified, it is difficult for you to know that, okay, these are the people that need remedial courses, for example. These are the people that need more work than others. So when you look at the idea of maybe inclusion, which is also part of this discourse, you see a lot of theoretical framework about how it can be applied. And then you spoke about the idea of the curriculum that is far removed from our reality. Unless we are able to come back home, we cannot be able to even identify those competencies in the first place. Bernard Fondon argues that the basic and the first principle of educational psychology should be to begin from the familiar to the unfamiliar, from the simple to the complex, which is a perspective that Jerome Brunner buys in his concept of spiral curriculum, where you begin from simple concepts to complex concepts, where you begin from realities that are within the reach of the learners to realities that are far-fetched. We cannot begin to talk about fishing in Norway, lumbering in Japan, when we fish in Cameroon. We cannot begin to talk about plantation agriculture, for example, in USA, when we have the Tole tea estate, we have the Ndu tea estate, we have the rice in Dop, we have the Ndawara tea estate and others. So education must be able to begin from our realities before we are able to identify that, okay, these are the competencies of the learners. Because you cannot identify the competence. There was one of our lecturers once made a fun that one of the reasons why Cameroonians do well out there is because when they go, they meet the reality of what they have been studying.
What they've been studying.
So you see, because they teach you realities that are far-fetched. Yeah, and one of the developmental psychologists, a Cameroonian, Bamen Samenang, argues that. Because that education and development or learning has to begin, start from the ecological and cultural perspectives. Because you do not expect that you bring foreign or alien ideas and people grasp when they are not yet familiar with their with the environment, and that's why he brings out the idea of the ecocultural theory of social ontogeny. It is a theory which he develops talking about development, life development. For example, because the way we grow in Africa is not the same way that is conceptualized, for example, from a Western perspective. Because in a lifespan development, mostly from the Western perspective, you see it as a progression from conception to natural or biological death. But Saminan argues that within the African context, life does not end at natural death. And that's where he brings in the aspect of the ancestral selfhood, which begins after the biological or natural death till reincarnation for people that reincarnate. So you see that if we are not contextualizing our education, and that is why we talk about rethinking the African philosophy of education, starting from our reality, from home to abroad, because we cannot be able to identify the competencies of learners if we are not in the first place able to situate them within the context of their own environment, what they already know and what they are already familiar with. So I think that it is about, first of all, contextualizing the education, contextualizing the curriculum, before we can be able to talk about the competencies. What are the cultural, what Therese Chombe calls cultural amplifiers, like fishing, the carving, and all those, which are found within the hunting and the rest, which are found within the African context. Now, how do we blend them with, because we are living in a world that is in continuous motion as a result of technological advancement. How do we blend them with contemporary advancements to make sure that those competencies are developed to fit the needs and aspirations of the contemporary society? So that's what we have to, there is need for that contextualization for us to be able to boost those competencies.
Right. I like the way the conversation is going. We blend a lot of theories and practicalities, which of course it's a cause for concern. I think we need to have symposiums to really expose some of these very interesting insights and be able to cause some perfect change. Now, it brings to mind, it is not as if things were like this before. Reverend Ye said in the 60s, 70s, Cameroon will loan money to countries out of far away, because the educational system perhaps at that time was tailored towards a lot of professionalization. We look at GTHS Ombe. It is renowned to have produced so many technocrats because they learn the practicality 70% and the theories maybe just some 30%. But today is the reversal. And the worst of it is that some of those commercial or technical educations are seen as second fiddle. Parents would prefer to send their children to grammar schools and let them, rather than having the 5 A's and scoring all those things, rather than send them to those commercial or technical schools. So is it a mindset problem, or the government itself doesn't just pay so much attention to technical education or the technicality of education? Because when we say technical education, we maybe just be looking at those schools, but the technicality of education that is giving more for practicals and less for theory.